This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we cover all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We are your hub, your go-to, your day one. But not really, though. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, former head coach of the Princeton Tigers from 2007 to 2011, and former three-time captain of the Tigers in 95, 96, and 97. My co-host is Princeton alumnus and former Princeton graduate assistant coach Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler.
Coach, great to be with you.
Yeah, man, this is great. I know this has been a few years in the making in terms of our conversations with each other, and why don't we just kind of talk through, our what, our why. We know that our what is, the Ivy League Hoops Hour is, you and I are always talking about the games, not just Princeton. I mean, just Yale, Harvard, what they've done. We've got our guy, Brian Earl, over at Cornell, and just the big wins and the trends that are going on. It's always been a topic of conversation between me and you. And so, why not share it with our listeners and keep our conversation going regularly? One of the things in terms of why, for me personally, I'm not a podcaster, as you know, and I'm a coach, all day, every day. Very engaged in FIBA 3-on-3 and youth player development at this point in my career. I was at Air Force as associate head coach last year, and you did a great job of keeping in touch with me, not only there, but while I was at Fairfield. And obviously us working together at Princeton, and then mixing in some broadcasting as well, which I thought I did a good job with a couple of years ago, but it's all through a lens of coaching. And so not having my own team, I'm just always watching games, pro, overseas, high school, and obviously Ivy League, mid-major, high major, the whole thing, and seeing trends and styles of play. And I need an outlet, and you've been someone that I've trusted for years, and obviously we work together, at Princeton. So I don't know how long, we'll be doing the Ivy League Hoops Hour, but I know for this season we're going to have a heck of a long ride, and I know that we have insights, especially on Ancient Eight basketball, to provide people. I think we're insiders at the least, and so I'd say buckle up. But we haven't, always necessarily articulated it this way. And so, Lawrence, what kind of brings you to the table at this stage?
Well, I've shared my opinions over the years. I say some more grounded, some more ridiculous over the years.
No doubt on the latter, no doubt.
But I guess why do it now? I guess it's been a long time coming. Being away from Ivy League basketball for the last few years, probably a little more, sanguine or level-headed about about my positions on
right.
What's what and the way things should go.
Right.
But at the same time, like everything else, the college game is changing rapidly, and being an institutionalist, someone who loves to look at institutions and norms and conventions, I think it's worth talking about the direction things are going.
Well, people are going to get a real good glimpse of that, because you ain't lying. I mean, sometimes the stuff you throw at me, I still have these like research papers you give me with all the numbers and Boogie. At some point, I got to bow out if it's not offensive rebounding percentage and turnover rate and all that. I struggle to keep pace, but no, it's been, I've learned from you with that aspect, with that lens that you have. I know that you appreciate what I do, and I feel like these conversations are worth sharing with others, but first and foremost, just continuing amongst ourselves. And so let's have at it. I think we're going to try to do this almost weekly. I would say weekly, but there might be a time where there's natural breaks in the Ivy League season. At the same time, we may fill those breaks with double hosts, or I should say double guests And so we're going to try to stick to a weekly or almost weekly schedule, and we're going to try to make the pods available to people in all the different ways that they get their podcasts. And we're also highly encouraging. We have an email address set up, Ivy League Hoops Hour @gmail.com. And we would love to get, questions from you all listeners, questions on the league, topics to cover, comments, and I'll just put in this disclaimer that, don't send anything in anonymous. We want your name on it, and we want to hear from you, and we want to know and kind of establish our listening base and take credit for what you're sending in, and just avoid anything sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, the like. We're just we're trying to keep things positive and focused on men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. And I'll also say this: there are over 35 Division I programs at each and every single Ivy League institution, men's and women's sports. And so we're going to highlight different programs that are doing great things, big time successes. This is probably a good time to mention Sean Driscoll, head coach of the Princeton women's soccer team. That's my guy. And the Princeton women's team finished second in the league to a fantastic Brown team, coached by Kia McNeil. She led the Brown Bears to an undefeated Ivy League championship. So Brown made the NCAA tournament. Sean Driscoll's Princeton women's team made the NCAA tournament, and Harvard women made the tournament as well. Princeton won their first round game. Brown and Harvard came up a little bit short, so their seasons are done. Very good seasons. And Sean is playing on Friday, and I should say Princeton women are playing on Friday, but Sean is my guy. They are playing Princeton. They're playing TCU in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And for those who are uninitiated, there's a whole lot of teams playing women's soccer. I mean, it's as many as men's and women's basketball. There's over 300 Division I programs. So to be a top 25 team like Princeton has done, like Brown has done this year, and Harvard, it's pretty impressive. And so we're going to shout out different programs throughout the year who are doing some special things. And there's our nod to Princeton women's soccer team. All right, let's jump into our picks for games, teams, players of the week. We're going to try to post our podcast on Fridays. Don't hold us to that, but that is the target. And we hope that you subscribe, give us a great rating. And again, definitely give us your feedback as we move throughout the year. But this segment is called My Eyes Don't Lie to Me. And that's a homage or a heads up to a guy that I really enjoy listening to. Roy Keane was a former midfielder for Manchester United, my favorite football team. I was going to say soccer, but I don't want to get voted off the island. But he played for Manchester United and Ireland, and he's a great commentator on sports and football to this day, or in this present day. I listen to him a lot, and I learn a lot about the game. And so I really enjoy listening to him, but he often says, my eyes don't lie to me. He's not a big one to make kind of forecasts and predictions. He speaks more on, what he's seeing in the games, and he lets that kind of inform his opinion. And I like that approach. I'm not taking a shot at any of the, the polls and all that preseason stuff, but, everybody knows if you're picked first to win your league, then you feel good about it. If you're picked second all the way to the bottom, you really don't put much stock into it. And it's really the games that matter. So Boogie, as we're looking at this week past, I would say for me, let's start with the game of the week. My game of the week would be Princeton versus Minnesota in the Asheville championship game. That was a tremendous showcase for the Tigers and for the Ivy League in general. Princeton was able to knock off South Carolina in the semifinals in the first round. A very good win there. And then had such a battle with the Minnesota Gophers, I should say. Sorry about that. I think a double overtime win for the loss for the Tigers, but an outstanding game. They continue to fight and claw their way, make just enough shots and get just enough stops, I should say, to get into the first overtime. And then the second overtime, they came up short, but it was an outstanding game. Jalen Llewellyn played really well. Just really couldn't be stopped. Was just getting guys off the dribble, making enough threes. The kid who stuck out to me, Lawrence, definitely want to get your feedback on this kid and then what your game of the week was. But the big kid, Mason Hooks for Princeton. He's a freshman. He's from Harvard Westlake out in California, a storied program, high academic, a place that sends a ton of kids to the Ivy League and other places. But this kid is an absolute stud. He is a load on the block. Guys in the Big Ten, Minnesota, had their hands full trying to deal with this kid. And I firmly believe that Princeton will win an Ivy League championship and get to the NCAA tournament with this kid in uniform. He's only a freshman, so, maybe it happens this year. Princeton's looking really good, but they are going to the NCAA tournament with this kid, Mason Hooks. He's hard to guard on the block, does enough on the perimeter. He is huge, can provide rim protection, switch on guards on the perimeter. He's going to bring a lot to the Tigers. They're going to have fun watching him.
Well, it sounds like, if nothing else, you've lost your Princeton paranoia about putting the whammy on us. No pressure, Mitch.
Fair enough.
My game of the week was Cornell Binghamton. I'm watching Brian Earl's Big Red, playing well, and then I'd say 5 minutes later, it looks like there's 5 new guys in there, and they're playing next man up, putting the pressure on, full court press, and taking the ball to the rim. And that was a solid team win for those guys. So well done them.
I would say I'm just really impressed with how fast Cornell is playing. Brian is proven to be an excellent coach. He's always doing, more with less. And what I mean by that is, his guys that he's bringing in are diamonds in the rough. Okay, they're not highly touted in terms of the freshmen here. They are very good programs and winning programs. And Brian knows the game. He's an excellent player himself, so he knows when kids can play, brings them in, gets them better. And now they're playing at this electric pace. They're flying the ball up and down. It's still rooted in Princeton offense, core values and principles, but they're picking up full court as well and turning you over. So the pace at which the Big Red are playing is something that people are really going to have fun watching. And they're 3-0 right now, so they couldn't be doing much better than that. And it's going to be fun to see how he stays with that style of play and how it's greeted once we get into conference play. In terms of teams of the week, we are thrilled this week that we will have David McLaughlin, the head coach of the Dartmouth Big Green, on our show as a guest because his team went into Georgetown, Washington, D.C., storied program, coached by Patrick Ewing, one of the greatest college basketball players in the history of the game, absolutely dominant, Hall of Famer. It's not like he didn't have a good NBA career, all right, for the Knicks. And he is now coaching the Georgetown Hoyas. They won the Big East Championship last year, but the Dartmouth Big Green go in there and knock off the Hoyas, completely dominated the game respectfully to Georgetown. That's where I worked. I love that program. John Thompson III, a great friend of mine. And we had some good years there, Final Four, the whole thing in 2007. And, I root for him, on the side. But Dartmouth goes in there and they dominated. They were never sped up. They got all the shots that they wanted. They rebound just well enough, and they pulled out the win. So for Dartmouth to go ahead and do that early in the season was really impressive, and I would choose them as our team of the week. Player of the week this week is Chris Ledlum from the Harvard Crimson. Now, I know there's a lot of games and there's a lot of good stuff going on, and we're not necessarily looking to be contrary to, what the Ivy League conference necessarily picks or what other people pick. But just like I said, my eyes don't lie to me. They're games that I'm watching and I'm seeing, and Chris Ledlum's a kid who just jumps out at you. He's, and quite literally 6'4", maybe very wildly athletic. He'll put it on your head in a heartbeat. And he also can make enough threes just in terms of keeping you, I guess balanced or honest, I think is the best way to put it, Lawrence. But he wills his way to the basket over and over. And again, powerful finishes. He's really, really aggressive with the ball in his hands. So they blew out Morehouse, which is a nice game for Tommy Amaker to schedule and play. And then they go to Iona, which is a perennial power in the Metro Athletic Conference. And coach, obviously, we know by Rick Pitino, Hall of Famer. He's just going to keep building what was tremendously done by Tim Kluse in years past with the Gales. And so they lose an overtime game, a close one. But Ledlum was electric again, and then they beat an Albany team just the other night. So Harvard is playing well and still looking to get healthy, and Chris Ledlum is among the tops in scoring and rebounding, and has had a really good start to his season so far. So I wanted to pick him as our player of the week, and we'll take it from there. We're excited to see games, teams, players, and we're pouring over them, whether it's live on the different forums, ESPN, Fox, what have you, Synergy, and we're covering and touching every team for our listeners to know. And so, again, if you've got some thoughts, send them in. But we're going with Princeton, Minnesota, game of the week, Dartmouth, team of the week, and Chris Ledlum from Harvard, player of the week. We're here with David McLaughlin, head coach of the Dartmouth Big Green, coming off a huge week, which we'll touch upon in short order. But this is the Ivy League Hoops Hour's inaugural guest spot, and we're thrilled to have David McLaughlin with us, as his team is the team of the week. And we're excited to have Coach here. Coach, how you doing?
I'm great. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
Yeah, this should be good. We are expecting to have these types of conversations with coaches and student athletes throughout the season. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Ancient Eight, and you're starting us off. I've got my co-host here, Lawrence Schuler. And Lawrence, why don't you jump in?
Coach, thanks for joining us. To start, can you tell us a little more about yourself, your background? Tell us what it was like being a student athlete at Colby and playing for Coach Whitmore.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I'm glad you started with Coach Witt. He's a huge influence on my basketball career. So played at Colby, Division III school in Maine, the NESCAC, also known as a small Ivy. And besides my dad, Coach Whitmore was the second biggest male influence in my life. And the impact he had on me, the impact he had on our teammates, and the program that he built up there just really had a lot of influence on me and really made me want to go into coaching. So he's still a mentor to me to this day. Probably talk to him, once a week, if not more. First guy that texts me after wins or losses. Not afraid to tell you what you do poorly too.
Right.
And after Colby, I worked at Wesleyan University for a couple of years, and then became an assistant at Stonehill and was actually named head coach midway through the year. Was interim coach, named interim coach on January 2nd. So it was a very unique thing. And a lot of thing I tell younger coaches is you have to be ready to be a head coach tomorrow, because you don't know if you're going to be or not. And that was me. I was an assistant coach at 11 p.m. and I was a head coach at 8 a.m. So it was you got to make sure you're prepared for that. And
Coach, at what age? Yep. At what age did that occur?
I was 27.
Wow. So pretty close in age with the guys you're coaching, obviously.
Absolutely. And it was, it was interesting. They said to me that they weren't gonna, they were gonna open the job up. It was gonna be a national search. I probably wouldn't get it, and but they wanted me to coach for the rest of the year. And then at the end of the season, they didn't open it up for a search, and they offered me the job, which was great. And I was there for 9 years as head coach. After that, I left to work with Bill Cohen, who's one of my biggest mentors at Northeastern.
Right.
Loved my 3 years there. Just a phenomenal person, and met Peter Roby there as well, who was the athletic director there, who's a Dartmouth grad, who was captain here of the men's team. And now Peter is the athletic director here at Dartmouth. So it's great to be here with him and in a place that I just love right now. And I love being up here. I love this area. I love this league. And it's just incredibly competitive and fun to work in this league.
Coach, how has it been? And I've been in that situation and other coaches across the country where your boss, whether it's high school, college, you know, even the NBA, you know, that your boss has that wide a breadth of coaching experience and familiarity with the sport. What is that relationship with you and Roby at this point? That dynamic.
It's a great question. It's incredibly healthy, and you know, some things you don't have to talk about because you just know, and
right.
Or some things that are brought up that maybe normally wouldn't be brought up with an administrator because he knows what you're going through. And I'm very fortunate that his door is always open. And he knows that if I need something, I'll come to him, and I know that he'll be there. So it's a very healthy relationship, and to have someone who you consider a mentor, be the athletic director is a really special thing.
Tremendous. So now we're in year 6. And I know we're fast forward and are bringing ourselves up to date, but we have to spotlight. We can't get too far into this interview without that Georgetown win, 69-60. You go into Washington, D.C., Georgetown is a storied program. It's a program I looked up to as a kid, and whether it was Patrick Ewing or Reggie Williams or Mark Jackson, those guys were getting it done. And John Thompson Jr. is a coaching hero of mine. His son I worked for. And then you have Patrick Ewing now as a head coach, and then they win the Big East championship last year. You guys go in there and get it done. You're up by 18-19 in the first half. Ryan Cornish is cooking. You got guys making shots left and right, Barry, Samuels. I mean, what is that? How did that feel? Just talk us through that experience.
Yeah, so I think the experience goes back to post-game Boston College, so we hadn't played in 20 months, and I think I underestimated what it was going to be like for the guys. And we just didn't have a real identity against BC on Tuesday. And a lot of credit to BC, they played us well. And practice talk on Thursday and Friday to the guys were, hey, how do we want to be defined? If someone's looking at Dartmouth basketball, what do they want to say about us? If we want to describe ourselves to someone, whether it's the media or a recruit or another teammate or someone on campus, how are we going to describe what Dartmouth basketball is? And we need to take that next step and defining that. And this is a great opportunity to do that. And I thought the guys really grasped that and were able to take that into the game. And we were very detail oriented. We were incredibly disciplined at both ends of the floor. And I thought our decision-making was at a high level, again, at both ends of the floor. And that's how we want to be defined, that sort of execution team. So I was thrilled that they carried that into the game. Beyond that, making shots helps, right? We made some early threes, and that just really loosens you up. We are a good shooting team. And I think when you make some early shots, it just allows you just to feel loose in a game. And I think it's really important for the guys, especially when there's 10,000 people in an arena.
Right.
And I thought we got some early stops, and I thought we rebounded the ball well. That's the one thing we talked about is, like, if we can rebound, I think we can get out on these guys a little bit. Even though they're a bigger and more athletic team, we weren't afraid to run on them. And I thought we rebounded the ball well early, and it just really helped us to get stops. When we talk about getting bricks, 3 consecutive stops, and we had 6 bricks in the first half.
Yeah,
so that really allowed us to get out and run and really, really have some good offensive possessions.
Coach to coach, there's always a point where you're prepping for a team. You're watching film, you're going through scout in practice, maybe it's the shoot around, or there's a moment, coach, in the game where you're like, we can beat these dudes. Like we can handle this. When was that point for you? Maybe it was at the final buzzer when you're shaking Big Pat Ewing's hands, but I'd love to know at what point for you personally did you know you guys could beat the Georgetown Hoyas in Washington, D.C. on the road?
I'd say probably after the first 5 possessions, you felt as soon as you see the translation of what you're working on in practice, both offensively and defensively, and Cindy, you've been there, many times over, okay, these guys got this. This is exactly what we talked about. This is what we said we wanted to do defensively, offensively. I think when you see those first 5 possessions, you're like, okay, this is how we want to defend them. So I want to rebound. This is how we want to, really play discipline on the offensive end. And you had that flow. And once that flow comes, you don't think about that the rest of the game. Are we going to win or lose? You kind of you're just coaching the group. And it wasn't a strain to say, okay, how are we going to figure this out? What's going to happen here? We had that rolling pretty early. So I think in the first 5, you're like, okay, we're good. And then the first media, when you finally get the guys together, there wasn't any rush in the timeout. It's like, hey, this is everything we talked about. We're in good shape. Just keep doing what you're doing. And most of the timeouts were that. Just keep doing what you're doing.
It's so funny. I can literally feel what you're saying because I've like you said, I've been in there in those moments, but also in watching the game, I felt that's how you guys looked. I'm so excited for Ivy League basketball this year because the strength of the league is so impressive. And you guys were a showcase. They never sped you up. You guys looked so comfortable. I think you dictated the way the game was played in both halves. And so I saw, my eyes don't lie to me, I saw what you're talking about, Coach. It was just, you look like a comfortable, polished, well-coached team, and you certainly deserved the win. Again, you building this program, and you see all these celebrations with the kids after games where, the water bottles and they're dousing the coach. And I'm sure the trip back to Dartmouth or New Hampshire was terrific and everybody was riding a high. But for you, Coach, what does this mean? I mean, this is a signature win for your career, for you personally, what you're building. I mean, can you share with us the significance it means to you, your family, your staff, people who really care about you? Because this is a big time win.
I'll answer that with two quick answers. But the first, in terms of, I was really pleased for our staff. They've been working really hard. And as you well know, you look at some of these, major programs in Division I, and they have huge staffs, right? And then in the Ivy League, we just don't. We have our coaches, we have our ops, and we're doing all of it, the film, the breakdown, the instruction, the recruiting. And I think that's why coaches that move on, especially assistant coaches or associate head coaches from the Ivy League, they're ready, whatever that next job is, because they've worn a lot of hats. So I was really happy for our staff and
Sure.
really happy for our players because they've been working very hard for a while now and having not played for a while.
Right.
And I was happy for our alumni base because, we did have a lot of alum and family there, and to play well in front of that environment is great. And then I think to represent the league, it's such a special league. It's so unique in so many ways. So to represent the league that way was awesome. And I think the second way I'd like to answer it is Monday morning, getting ready for work. We're getting the kids ready for school, and I must have had this look on my face like I'm just focusing on something else. I'm not present. And my wife said to me, "You can't even enjoy that win for more than a day, can you?" And I said, no. I was already moved on to practice, to recruiting, to whatever the next thing was. So it's funny, and I'm sure you've been there. Like you carry the losses longer than you should, and the good wins, you just move on probably quicker than you should.
Right. Well, you're keeping them in the zone.
Exactly.
To that end, Coach, what would you say is the challenge in terms of playing on the road, Big East environment, or anywhere, whether it's Big East, CAA, whatever, just outside of the league, going on the road and playing versus the challenge that it presents to you in the league, where people know you just a little bit more, obviously, They know your team, your players. Just can you weigh those challenges and kind of let people in terms of how you view it? You know, what challenge it presents, or the differences and similarities in terms of going on the road, out of conference and in conference.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is routine, right? So you want to have a routine when you travel. So this is how we're going to do, whether it's walkthroughs, or this is what we're going to be doing for film, or this is how we're doing pregame meals. I think when you can get guys in a routine and it becomes normal, then being on the road becomes normal, if that makes sense. So I think the routine is a big factor. Playing non-league versus league opponents, or playing earlier in the season versus late in the season, you know, there's not a ton of data early in the season for road games. So you're playing teams and you might not know a lot of things that are coming. So, you know, in the first 3 to 4 to 5 weeks of the year, teams are going to be different drastically week to week, whether it's rotations or actions they have in, or non-league, maybe different defenses that you might see. So it varies drastically. When you get into league, you're right. It's the depth of detail, especially on personnel, the depth of detail on how you're going to attack someone both offensively and defensively goes to a higher level, because you do have more data at that point. Everyone's got 13, 14 games under their belt, and you have experience playing and coaching against other programs. So the one unique thing this year is on the road, there's not all Friday, Saturday games.
Right.
So the league schedule's changed to 10 weeks. So now you have 3 Friday, Saturdays. You have 2 single days, which would be either January 1st or January 2nd, and then Martin Luther King Day. And if I'm doing my math right, I think that means there's 6 single Saturdays. So
that's right. Yep.
So you might have an entire, instead of, okay, we're prepping for a Friday, Saturday opponent, which we have to do 3 times. Now you're going to have multiple weeks where you have a week to prepare for one opponent. And I'm not quite sure, you know, we haven't been there, done that yet. So I think that's going to take that even to another level, that attention to detail.
You know, I'm torn, because the Friday, Saturday is so traditional. And so it means a lot to me, you know, having done it as a student athlete and as a coach, you know, and just that grind, you know, I really thought that separated the men from the boys. But there's also something exciting about that, you know, one game a week is essentially how I look at it, you know, and just, you know, Saturday to Saturday, there's some, you know, I think individual development that can be enhanced, player development that I think sometimes gets lost during the season. So have you guys started as a staff to think about that? And then just basically, where do you come out on that in terms of that Friday, Saturday, again, that you'll have 3 of them, but it's not, you know, week in and weekend out. How do you look at that?
So we've been talking about it as coaches for the past couple of years and looking at different models and in terms of scheduling. And I'm glad we still have a couple, to be honest with you, but mm-hmm. I am looking forward to it and seeing what it's like. We have talked about it as a staff. And I think it's really important for developing players. I think you hit the nail on the head there. When you play Friday, Saturday, think about the young, talented players in your program. It's hard to get them the work they need during the week. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're going, you think about it 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and even Thursday, because it's an incredibly light day. That's 4 days with not a lot of reps for those guys. So now that's one of our challenges, right? We have a large roster, as a lot of Ivies do this year because of COVID. How are we developing the entire roster holistically, not just as players, but holistically? And I think this allows us more time to do that.
Indeed. Well, Coach, we're grateful to have you on our pod and be our first guest. Before we let you go, as you look at your team, you know, moving forward, whether it's on or off the court, or maybe, you know, trends in the league and what you see throughout the conference, what would you like to see? What do you imagine and hope for with your squad or for Ivy League basketball moving forward?
I think, you know, a couple answers to that, but I think the big vision, and I think it's shared by many in the conference. I think the league's competitive enough and talented enough, and the coaches do such a great job. Can we get can we become a league that ever gets more than one bid? I think that it's very hard to do that. And what is going to be the direction of the NCAA? There's a lot of things changing in the NCAA, and how is that going to affect our league? I think that's one that we always have to keep our eyes on as a league. I think that's incredibly important. The second thing I would say that I'm pretty passionate about, and I know a lot of coaches in our league are, in the Ivy League, our third assistant, we're not allowed to pay our third assistant coach.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that has to change, and we have to allow our athletic departments to fund that third spot, because we have incredibly talented young men that are working and not, getting an income from the school. And I think it'll allow for, to keep giving more opportunities to more coaches. So I would love to see the league change that sometime in the near future.
And Coach, that's not necessarily a financial issue. I mean, the last time I checked, the Ivy League is pretty well endowed across the league. So I'm understanding that correctly, right?
Correct. I think it's just a policy, and I'm not sure. I know it's been there forever, but I feel strongly it's a policy that needs to change. Yeah.
Well, we'll hope for that, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for you guys to continue your form. You came off that Georgetown win with over 40-point win against Northern Vermont, and you get this break, and then you're back up into playing really good basketball. Coach, as our team of the week, we really appreciate you coming on here and representing Dartmouth and the league so well, and thanks a ton for your time.
This is great. Sydney and Lawrence, thanks so much.
The way it used to be when we would be up in the office before practice.
There you go. Yep. Right. No, yeah. I'm with you. And then those conversations, those types of conversations continued from afar, as I was up in Connecticut and you're in Jersey, or I'm here and you're there.
Or when I would just show up to to the arena.
There you go.
No questions asked.
You would do it enough times that then people would just be like, "Oh, that's just Lawrence. Let him in."
that's that guy.
They thought you were on staff at Fairfield. You were on staff. Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. And I would say this. I would just say this, Boogie, is that neither one of us have got it, whatever that is, in terms of the podcast thing. But I know that we bring. This is what's weird, but we bring value and insight to the space. Not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we know the league, we know the coaches, we know the players, we know the trends. And so if it's not packaged perfectly in terms of podcast style, I know it's content worth listening to. And at a very minimum, it's worth our time to connect and cover these things. But there's some insight, and there's some stuff that's going to come out, and then also we're going to get coaches and players on here too that will enhance the conversation and hopefully get some feedback from the audience to cover some things that they want to talk about, which I don't think is in that podcast space, no matter how it's delivered and glossed up and presented.
Well, that said, you get what you paid for, and so that's why America, this is being published for free. So,
although
both apologies and you're welcome at the same time.
Right. But we'll take your rating, subscribe, and give us the thumbs up or what have you. So, Lawrence, let's look at how teams in the league are playing in terms of style, maybe pace, speed of which, and then there's also that hovering topic that's tied a bit to what we just covered in terms of Princeton offense, where that style of play is not only being played at Princeton, but at Cornell, at Dartmouth, that jumps out at me, but Richmond and Air Force and various teams throughout the country, and the pace of how quickly those teams are playing. But you've done some research, and let's chop that up a little bit.
All right, well, according to teamrankings.com, this is where I'm getting all these numbers, all right, through November 14th. right? The pace of play isn't as you might expect. The third-ranked team in the country in terms of pace of play, possessions per game,
Right.
It's Harvard, 89.3 possessions a game.
Wow. Okay.
Princeton, 29th, 79.4 possessions a game.
Right.
And then not too far behind, Cornell, 78.6. And I know this is not an Ivy League team. It's a Patriot League team. But in terms of style of play, in the past, Mike Brennan and the American University Eagles, right?
Right.
Very much rooted in the Princeton tradition, the methodology. 53rd, 78 possessions a game.
Right. They got a good win against William and Mary, CAA team, just a few days ago, and then played Georgetown pretty well the other day with the Eagles. So they're off to a solid start. My first reaction is, no matter what you say, if you're coaching a Princeton offense style of play, you are not believed that you're playing fast, regardless as to the numbers that you brought up. That's my humble opinion, and it just needs to be said. So I know we've bounced that around, but why is that? Because the numbers, not only my eyes don't lie, but the numbers don't seem to lie, and those guys are getting up and down, and they're well rooted in Princeton offense style of play.
Well, to your point, and for some perspective, right? So our last year together at Princeton, you were the head coach for the 2010-2011 team that went to the NCAA tournament, and throughout that year, and I think this was written about in the media, right? That year's Princeton team was playing at a faster pace, right? It was probably not a good time to bring up the Duke game, but
that was rough.
But it was worth it. It was important.
Yeah, no,
it was part of our development as a team.
No doubt. How good was Carl Singler,
also,
by the way?
He was incredible.
Yeah,
I still remember he dove into the crowd after a loose ball on the baseline, disappeared into the sea of people, and the next thing you saw was his two hands holding up a basketball.
It's unbelievable.
like the baby lion.
It was something else.
So,
I mean, that was finish your point, but I want to touch on Duke in that game in terms of development, but keep going.
Well, Kyrie Irving had a pretty good game too. He didn't play that many games his year at Duke,
but somehow, some way, he was healthy enough for the Tigers, huh? Gave it to us.
Well, to your point, in that year, according to TeamRankings.com, Princeton played 66.1 possessions a game.
Right,
and that was with the 35-second shot clock, so a little bit different perspective from today's 30-second shot clock. But if you scale our possessions for that year by 7/6, so a little over one, probably multiply by 1.16. Math off the top of my head, probably not a good idea. But if you scale it that way,
right,
all right, our possessions, 77.12 possessions a game.
Right,
so that still puts us behind this year's Princeton team and behind this year's Cornell team,
right,
and pretty far behind the Harvard team at 89.3. Right. So everything's faster.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, in this, I think that's been embraced, obviously. And the numbers reflect it. I mean, if you're playing, walk it up, I mean, to be honest, you're dating yourself a little bit, and, whether it's the reset, think about now with the reset. And I think this is not only the 35 to 30, but think about an offensive rebound now, Boogie, where it's the clock is reset to 20 instead of back when we were playing, it would be a full 35-second reset. So I think that's impacting the game. And then obviously there's 3-point shooting at all positions now, positionless basketball, pass, dribble, shoot. That's something that Princeton offense has adopted for years, obviously, but now all these other teams are playing that way. And so, if you're not there, you're being left behind. Before I forget, I want to talk about that Duke game, and I don't in any way want to get sentimental about getting our asses kicked, which is basically what happened against Duke when we brought a very good Princeton team there. But I will say, in terms of the development, Coach K has his fans and people who love him, and then he has his critics, and I don't know who they are, but consider me a fan in this regard, and this is connected to the development of our team that season. They blew us out, and they kept playing until 1 to 2 minutes left in the game with their starters, and they would have tried to beat us by 100 if they could have, because they were playing to the standard that they set for themselves. And that was something that we always had ingrained in us, Lawrence, by Coach Carrill as players. And we knew the standard that existed at Princeton and the connection we had with the alums. And then I was passing that along to my guys, and we were coming along with that. But then sometimes you need, a kick, or you need a jar, or you need a catalyst. And that game took it to a whole nother level of, like, as I talked to the guys in the locker room, they would have beat us by 100 if they could have. And that is the standard that we need to bring ourselves to, where, we are trying to run through people, and we'll just take care of what we expect to bring to the game. And we ain't worried about anybody else and how it's viewed. And I think that our players, and we had our ups and downs and had to figure things out to get ultimately that championship. We weren't perfect, but I thought that was huge in terms of our development and our maturation as a team. And so even in a moment like that, where you're humbled, the game is, it humbles you. We did not win, but we learned. And I'm glad that you remember that game as I do, because I did think it was fundamental to what, we did that year. And I think that teams now in the games that we're playing right now, they're experiencing that, whether it's, again, that Dartmouth beating a Georgetown and a Yale beating a UMass. Those lessons are being played out now. If you're watching your team, watch them closely for that. Zero in to see how your team is maturing and growing, because that's the fun part. And then when you get to March, you look back and you go, damn, I'm glad we played those games, because now we're ready for the moment. Does that make sense, Lawrence?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One more thing about Coach K.
Yeah.
From that game, that speaks to the type of coach and person he is. After winning by 30, right, he comes down the handshake line, and
right,
he comes toward the end, and there's a gap between me and the last person in the line. So he's already on his way to the locker room, but out of the corner of my eye, he sees me, turns around, walks back to the handshake line, shake my hand, and then goes back into the locker room.
Wow.
So
wow. Lawrence, you never shared that with me.
Oh yeah, I was amazed. You learn a lot about people in those kinds of moments.
No doubt. That actually does give me chills. You never shared that with me, and being kind and just meeting people where they're at. That's just a gift, and it's something we should all embrace, and that's impressive. I'm glad to hear that. It kind of knocks him up another notch or two in my book.
Last thing for pace of play, though. In 2018, 2019, who was the national champion? Top of your head? Trivia question. That was the University of Virginia.
Man, you're not even. I was gonna say that, and you didn't even. Look, you didn't even give me like 3 seconds. Yeah, Virginia. Damn, I was at the Final Four. All right, keep going.
Do you know their ranking for possessions per game?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I am so glad. I am going to say that it was in the, I'm going to say, was it in the 300s?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
353. They were dead last in possessions per game. At 62.6 possessions a game, they won the whole thing.
Right.
So possessions per game for me, yes, informative, but it's not everything. How you defend, I think, matters. And if you're forcing teams to work hard to get shots, that's going to lower your possessions per game. Right, but that means that you're doing your job on defense.
Right. No, you crushed it. I mean, Coach Bennett's one of the best in the game. That's not a profound statement. You don't have to come to this podcast to hear that. And that I know you and I talked about that during that season. I know that we talked about that, and just that all the pundits and analysis on pace of play seemed to be quieted as they were just running through people and humbling storied programs like Duke and Carolina and winning the whole thing. And actually, and they were fun to watch. I mean, that was DeAndre Hunter, if I'm not mistaken, the kid, Jerome. Do I have that right? The two kids, they're the shooters. I'm drawing a complete blank. But the two shooters, DeAndre Hunter, they were defending, but they were making shots. Granted, it was deliberate, but they were really impressive. And then everybody wanted to play pack line defense,
Right.
The one thing I'll put in a plug, and this is my own coaching. That's, whether it's last year alongside Coach Scott or, in my own time leading Fairfield and Princeton. And, there's a great value in transition, and when you grind it out and get stops, you immediately at times have a 3-on-2, 2-on-1 advantage. What you do with that, I do think that matters as well. So I would match your defense, and I'm a defensive guy. I would match that defensive focus with what do you try to do in transition when it's the easiest time to score, which is when you have a numbers advantage. I mean, that's I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I have figured that out, that if I have 3 and you have 2 continually, I think my ability to score is enhanced. But that's something that we're going to be able to chop up that a lot more as we go through the season as well. We're at the segment in the Ivy League Hoops Hour where we would normally cover fan and email interaction, comments, questions. We are hopeful. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that you weigh in and connect with us. And if not, we'll just make some stuff up. But for now, being that it's our first podcast, we don't have any of that right now. So we'll look for episode 2, 3, 4. And have you join us on this ride and try to bring up some topics that you bring in. And I will also restate that we also want to hear in terms of teams, men's and women's athletic teams throughout the league that you would love to get a nod for, a heads up, or recognition, I should say. It's a good plug for me right now. I've seen the Yale women's basketball team play a couple of times so far. They got a nice win against Sacred Heart the other night, and they've got some good players. They got a point guard, Jenna Clark Lawrence, out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and she gets to the rim. She's a gutty kid. She'll hit step back threes, and she just drives a bus for that team. And I know that Princeton women are ranked one of the best women's basketball, one of the best teams in the country. They're absolutely dominant. And, that might be a good game in terms of Yale and Princeton. So we'll see how that goes. The Tigers are obviously really, really good, but it was fun to see Yale play in person. And Jenna Clark's a player that stuck out to me. So those are the types of things that we'd love to recognize and would lean on your help or just your interaction. If there's anybody that you think that we should cover. We're also going to have a non-Ivy League nod of the week. You know, Ivy League basketball is wonderful, as are the other sports going on in the league, but you know, it's not. We don't want. You know, this isn't going on in a bubble. There's a tremendous amount of basketball going on across the country. And like I said, I'm a coach. I'm watching all kinds of games. And so I want to tip my hat to UMass. I have a buddy of mine, Tyson Wheeler, worked with me all my years at Fairfield, one of the best coaches in the game. And I know coaches get all, you know, jazzed up about their guys. Tyson Wheeler ought to be a head coach. He can easily coach in the pros in the NBA. He's got an outstanding way to connect with people, Lawrence, tell them the truth, help them with their game. He sees, which is something we Princeton basketball guys greatly value. He sees and understands, and he could hoop himself. Well, he's at UMass as an assistant coach, Lawrence, and they got humbled the other day when they went to Yale. I went to see him in person. And they got beat bad. James Jones had his guys rolling. Matthew Cotton was really good. The kid Swain, I think preseason player of the year, and he was really good. But Yale's got a good team, and they beat UMass very well. UMass then came home 3 days later and played Penn State, and they beat them by over 25. So for me, I just think that that's a great response from the coaching staff, from the players, from UMass. It's an athletic 10. A team that really wants to make some progress there under Coach McCall. And I thought that was a good statement win for them to beat a team from the Big Ten on their home floor, especially after coming off a tough game against Yale. So that's my non-Ivy League nod of the week. How about you, Lawrence?
I think my nod has to go to the Indiana Hoosiers. A great win against St. John's. A couple of takeaways for me. First of all, Mike Woodson back in a suit. I respect that. I'll be back in a suit on the sideline. For coaches, you don't have to wear a suit, right? But I don't wear a suit for everybody else. I wear a suit for me, right? And so it's good to see somebody else back in a suit and tie. All
right,
the other thing I picked up during that game.
We're gonna have some words about that, but keep going. Keep going.
The other thing I picked up during that game, number one, Rob Finney. The rebound goes out to the corner. He's under the rim. So he has no chance to get the rebound, but he still hit a guy, right? And that's what it takes, right? That's why he's good.
That's the Big Ten, baby. That's the Big Ten.
The last thing is we have to give a shout out to Armand Hill.
Of course we do. Of course we do. So Armand Hill was a dynamite player at Princeton. He was a number 9 overall pick in the NBA draft. He came out early. He was the number 1 pick of the Atlanta Hawks and had a good career in the pros, was one of Coach Carrillo's best players ever. Then went into coaching, coached at Columbia, coached at Princeton, was my assistant coach for 2 years, and a huge impact on me and my life and all the guys on the team. I mean, we just adore Coach Hill, Armand. He then went on to coach in the pros. He's tight with Doc Rivers, that whole Atlanta Hawks thing, and won a championship with the Big Three and with the Boston Celtics, and then was out with the Clippers with Doc Rivers. And then he's tight with Mike Woodson, again, that whole Atlanta Hawks thing. So Armand Hill's out there in Indiana, right, Lawrence?
That's right.
He's on his bench and is helping him with player development and strategy, and has spent some time with Coach Hill this summer doing some 3-on-3 training with USA Basketball. And, you know, the thing about him is he knows he knows more than anybody else that's talking on these 2 microphones put together, and a whole lot of other people, but he doesn't lead with that. He's a humble brother who's just, and he's been around. He knows the game. He knows the parks. He knows how to conduct himself, and he knows how players think, and he's able to communicate that with them. But he is dynamite in himself, but he'll never lead with that. You know, that'll be the last thing you know about him, because he's just a genuine person. So that's a nice non-Ivy League nod, Lawrence. I think it's time to close it out. I really want to keep talking, but we want to keep our listeners and captivate their attention, have them join us like I said, almost weekly. This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we're going to cover all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We hope that you subscribe, again, in whatever way that you obtain your podcast content, and give us, I keep saying 5-star rating. I have no idea. I got to do my research if that's what the highest rating we can possibly get.
And be sure to keep an eye out for upcoming games this week. We've got Penn playing in the Myrtle Beach Invitational and Brown playing in the Paradise Jam.
And also send us your emails, DM us, tweet us, whatever it is. We would love to build up this community that's rallying around Ivy League men's basketball and have us all talking and arguing and sharing content, and also, again, spotlighting other teams that are doing great things throughout the league. Ivy League Hoops Hour at gmail.com is where you can contact us. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, with my buddy here, Lawrence Schuler, and we appreciate you joining us. Take care.
Now you go home.